Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Berezin from MSDynamics World. I'd like to thank everybody for joining today's session, How Dynamics Partners Prefer to Work with ISVs. We're actually going to be presenting the findings from our latest research study among almost 150 Dynamics partners. Mary Lou Barsom, who's a marketing consultant for us, will actually be presenting the data. And along with her, we actually have a special guest, Joel Whitaker, who represents the Dynamics partner Net Standard. So before we get started, I'd like to note that if you have any questions, you can just feel free to submit them in the Q&A box at any time, and we're going to get to all the questions at the end of the event. So without further delay, Mary Lou, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Adam, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever the case may be. As Adam mentioned, we ran this survey actually mid-September, and our goal in running the survey was to ask some very specific questions of Dynamics partners, questions that we knew or have known were on the minds of ISVs like yourselves, and perhaps would give you more insight in terms of what their expectations are. As Adam said, I think we got specifically a response sample of slightly over 200, 141 of which were Dynamics resellers and integrators. And then I've incorporated in 3 or 4 cases comments that came in the response set because I thought the elaboration would be very helpful for all of you. Hold on, this is stuck. There we go. So what I want to do is ask you, Joel, just to take a moment, please, before we dive into the results, and talk about what you do as a product manager at Net Standard and in the partner community.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is Joel Whitaker. I'm a product manager of our Dynamics 365 practice, as well as hosted GP and CRM here at Net Standard. I've been in various roles in product management for, I'm just going to say 20 plus years, something like that. And I'm excited to be part of the conversation today and give a few insights, things I've seen, and there may be some agreements and disagreements with what I have to say, but I'll give you kind of my color on some of the answers to the questions we're going to talk about today. Thanks, Mary Lou.
Okay. You're welcome. And once again, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us. So one of the things I like to do whenever we share results of a research study, especially for any of you that may have to leave us early before the end of the webcast, is basically summarize what the top findings are, because those are the questions that I will spend the most time on. And these are not necessarily in order of priority or rank. They just basically were what I felt to be the most important results. So probably not too much as a surprise, but when we asked, what was really valuable, product features and relationships with existing customers were 2 of the top criteria that the partners value the most. Second point, when we asked what resources the partner community uses to access information about you or for you to work together to communicate with your mutual customers, searching online and using online mediums outrank all other ways of communication to your mutual customer audiences. We asked a very pointed question about the role of trade shows in light of all the different marketing avenues that exist for you. And specifically, the feedback was not being present in a trade show doesn't indicate that you're having financial difficulty. We asked 2 or 3 questions about leads, and the one we're going to spend time on has to do with how the partner community prefers that you handle leads when you qualify them and pass them on to them. And then we asked about relationships with MSDynamics World, MSDW, and the majority of respondents value the site for news articles and webinars, and we'll drill down to that later as well. Quickly, some demographics. As you can see, clearly half the audience, size-wise, is between 5 and 25 million. 80% of the whole sample were resellers and integrators, and the majority of them, 70%, currently have ISV relationships with 11 or more companies. We also asked about the product offerings that you basically cover. And as you can see, these are in rank order in terms of which ones represent the ISVs and, the partners. And I thought this was interesting. And when I showed this to Joel, he had some insightful comments about it. So Joel, why don't you share those with the audience?
Oh, well, sure. I think a lot of people would probably be a little bit surprised by the results because, for example, number 2 on the list is Business Central, which, technically the, latest version of it's only been out since April. And, of course, the new version that came out in October has got a lot of fixes to it. So I was a little surprised to see that, as well as Power BI being on the top of the list. I would have more expected to see Dynamics 365 for Sales, the CRM, Azure, NAV, GP. I would have thought those would have been a little bit higher on the list. So I'm just not sure if people answered the question in an odd way, but I was just a little bit surprised by that. Now, everybody's getting into Power BI, I get it, so that's a good thing. And, of course, everybody's into Business Central and trying to figure out how that's going to fit in the new world. So just a surprise on my part.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's get right into the questions now. So one of the first questions we asked the partners was, when you are looking for new ISVs to partner with, how do you prefer to search for them and their products? So as you can see, the majority of responses indicated that online sources dominated, followed by peer input, and then trade shows. And, this isn't a surprise to me, or I don't think it should be to you as well. I think it's very interesting how close the response set is around using online, as well as basically getting peer advice and opinions. And we're going to drill down into this a little bit. But at first, I'd like to ask you, Joe, when you use the internet, especially initially when you're looking for new ISVs to partner with, can you describe to everyone what your exact process is and how you go about it?
I can, thank you. So I'll mention one thing up front is we, in the past, have had relationships with a lot of different ISVs, which is fine, except for the fact that, sometimes we only have one customer on a specific ISV's platform, and that's not really good for anybody. So one of the things we've been trying to do is reduce our farm, if you will, of ISVs. But that's one of the things I do when I look on for a specific thing, like I'll make it up, document management or something. I'll pick 2 or 3 to vet versus looking at 20, because there's just not enough time in a day to do that many. So that's one of the things we do. Also, it's really only used in the case where I don't already have something deployed at one of our customers and I don't have familiarity in that specific area. A lot of times I'll look for a specific vertical or a feature, function, whatever you want to call it, that works inside GP, Business Central, Dynamics 365, whatever, and is tied specifically to that main product. A lot of times we also see where a feature or function is embedded in part of a larger solution. So you'd be surprised if you look at specific ISV companies, what a wide breadth of services they offer. Typically the web part is used to vet the initial set, and then of course we pick up the phone and start making phone calls and emails to set up some calls to talk to them. So that's kind of how we do it. I can't imagine there's anything more in depth that others might do, but it'd be interesting to see if there's any discussion on that later.
Mm-hmm. So from this description, would you say that you are kind of early to mid-stage in your buying or consideration process?
Yes, it's always early. It's really always almost early. You know, I first talk to a customer and they need, you know, barcoding or something. Well, okay, cool. We'll go look and see what we can find in the barcoding space to tie to some product, get it. Excuse me. And then usually past that, that's when we start really having discussions with the actual ISV themselves, their sales team, technical team, et cetera.
Okay. So the takeaway for the ISVs on the call today is how important it is that when you get your results, they basically show up in them, and then they give you a really good first impression.
Agreed. And an easy way to get a hold of them, obviously, is important too.
Yeah, so. Right. Essential, right?
Right.
Okay, Joe. Thank you. And then as a follow-on to that, we asked, what are the top 4 criteria you most highly consider when choosing an ISV solution? And as you can see, it was like basically a 3-way tie between product features, how happy the existing customers are with the ISV, and their overall reputation. And to that, you added, Joel, quality, support, and profit margin. Do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So number one, obviously, is that the solution needs to work and work well. That's kind of a given, but probably even more important to that is the support model offered by the ISV. I really, really need a company that will support me when I need it and will support my customers when I need it. You know, not necessarily have exorbitant fees for support, easy to work with, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very important to me. We run a fairly tight ship, and I don't have a ton of time to necessarily learn some ISV that we've acquired. And, of course, at the end of the day, I have to be able to explain to my ownership, hey, this ISV is cool and it's better than this other one because they give us X% margins and it's a little bit better, all the other things being equal, because at the end of the day, we're trying to make money here. So really, those are the 3 things that I look for. And I'll tell you, support has become a very critical aspect for me over the past, you know, months or whatever. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, the emphasis you put on that. I mean, it was in the top tier ranking, but it wasn't at the top. But it's, you know, important information for these guys to hear. And then, do you have a due diligence process to ensure, related again to the responses on that previous question, that the ISV does have a strong relationship, that the ISV does have good relationships with its customers and proof points around providing support? Is there something specific that you do to make sure all that is in place before you actually engage with the ISV?
You know, I would say we're not really nearly necessarily as formal as it might sound, but I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. So one, if I know I have a very specific requirement for a customer and I've got ISVs that I use today for that, obviously the one who has the best product with the best support is going to be moved forward for that customer. If I have to reach out, I do my initial, obviously, searches on the web and figure out who looks good, have a conversation with them. I need to see a demo, obviously, a willingness on their part to offer up references, which I do call. And then I need to understand their support process. It's no different from any partnership I might get into with another company. I really need to know that if I pick up the phone and call, somebody's going to answer and that kind of thing. So really it's a conversation after the initial reach out, and it's a understanding of their business model and who they sell to, really is what it is.
Sure. It sounds pretty thorough to me as well. So moving on, thinking about marketing together in the next phase of questions with ISVs. So we asked the partner community, what steps can an ISV take to better tell its story and demonstrate alignment with your role as a service provider? And as you can see here, providing educational materials primarily online came in as highest for somewhat and most effective, as well as collaboration, specifically on webcasts, followed by seminars and print materials. And then related to that, how can an ISV best provide you with specific marketing and sales info? And again, we see online webinars that sales can use as well, and case studies and co-branded collateral. So I asked a question here of Joel that from these two question sets, it appears that most partners have a strong bias for webinars and case studies. So I was wondering if the ISVs were to provide webinars that included testimony from their satisfied customers, would that be the best combination of these two? Or do you like them in separate formats? If you could address that, Joel.
Yeah, I can. Actually, I've got a use case for you. I'll talk about a excuse me, specific ISV that did, I'm going to call it a relaunch recently. And obviously I got invited to a couple of webinars, and what they did was exactly what I would expect. They educated me on what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. They demonstrated the product to me, excuse me, in a way that was clear what it could do. And then third is they had a testimonial / use case at the end with a specific customer. That's very powerful, right? So you tell me what you're going to show me, you demonstrate it to me, and then show me a customer who you've worked with that uses the product and is happy with it. You know, some of the other things about print materials, that's all nice, and I don't necessarily need co-branded, you know, slicks and things like that, but having availability of that kind of stuff is helpful as well. But really a good quality webinar is what it's all about. Okay.
So based on that, what you're saying concretely is that it would be helpful if ISVs would develop webinars that have demos built right in them along with client testimony.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's really important information for them to hear. And in terms of downloading those webinars that might appear, for example, on MSDW, come through to you via an email, do you think it's really important for the promotional copy to specifically mention that the webinar includes a demo?
Yeah, I would. I mean, we all get literally hundreds of emails every day inviting us to different webinars, download white papers, all that stuff, right? The ones that are going to get my attention are for companies I trust, and number two is if they talk about, hey, come listen and see a demo of this, and we're going to talk about these things, that grabs my attention a lot better than, you know, some random white paper that maybe is not really a white paper, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Right. Okay, so important information for our audience to hear. Thank you. All right, so now shifting gears slightly, but still focused on marketing relationships between the partner community and ISVs. So first we asked the partner community, looking at this as, you know, a two-way relationship, obviously. Do you yourselves lay out a strategic marketing plan for individual Microsoft solutions that would make your product focus and priorities clear to ISVs? Now, the reason we asked this question is we had a series of workshops with MSDW's customers about a year ago, and a couple of those workshops, what was basically expressed by the ISVs attending them is that it would be very helpful for them to know what is really important to the partner that they're working with. So I found this interesting that there was basically a split here in terms of the response set. So that's probably why those ISVs are saying that, because half the community doesn't lay out that kind of planning, and almost half does or thinks they should. And then related to that, we asked the partners, should the ISVs provide a marketing template and materials that lay out? What are your expectations here? And you can see the difference. In terms of partner expectations, it's very obvious that they want ISVs to let them know how they plan to go to market with the products they're interested in. And continuing with that, this is one of those cases where I thought it'd be helpful for us to look at some specific responses. So, yeah, preferably, one of the partners said, but it depends on the functionality the ISV covers. It could work for e-banking, but not for contract management. So he's talking about vertical selection here. Another one said, we want marketing materials that are problem solution focused. They should be editable and allow for easy branding. We would collaborate with how to go to market with the ISV. This might be helpful to others, but it's not something we would use. Maybe a mixture would be the best approach. And here, it's a great theory, but unsure if it's really doable. We have found that having services from ISVs as part of the implementation helps with satisfaction and billing time. Essentially a yes, but you need to be presenting the solution as yours with a very strong commitment to the vertical, and it depends on industry focus. And then lastly, is it helpful to have a co-marketing strategic plan defined in an agreement or contract with an ISV? And yes, the majority said it would be helpful, although about 35% said no. So the picture we have here is that basically they don't want to be tied down. The partners don't want to be tied down necessarily, but they do want to know the ISV strategy when it comes to marketing with them together. And here we see, you know, responses all over the place. Things change, you need consideration on a case-by-case basis. For ISVs that are key to our offerings only, would we want to get, you know, into all this? It depends on how core to our overall strategy a solution is. Commonly, we may only require an ISV solution infrequently. It depends on the plan. We prefer to be agile. So putting that all together, and I know this is coming at it from a couple of different ways, Joel, but it's obvious on questions 11 and 15, we've got varied opinions. However, one thing that is clear is partners want a go-to-market plan, possibly defined in a contract, but also some of those responses show us that they don't want to be tied down too much. So I think it would be, again, very helpful if you would share NetStandard's experience in working with either a predefined marketing plan or a turnkey implementation plan, and tell us what you like and what you don't about either of these.
Sure. So I did want to make one comment up front too. How do I say this? So if we bring an ISV to the table to one of our customers and say, we want you to take a look at this one, they in effect have believed that we have vetted them. So I'm not going to bring an ISV to the table that I'm not comfortable with, because if it doesn't go well, maybe the ISV is going to get some heat, but I'm the one that's going to get most of it. So just kind of something to think about when you start talking about marketing. Number two is, I think, you know, when we talk about these marketing plans and implementation, a lot of that depends on the ISV itself. So if it's one we've had a lot of experience with, I honestly, I don't need any help. I know how it works. I know how to do it. I've got guys on the team and ladies on the team that can implement it, get it done, no problem. If it's new or I use it rarely, really I'm going to depend on that ISV a lot more. That seems intuitive, obviously, but in some cases I'm going to let the ISV, you know, with my program management, obviously, do the whole thing, right? So it really depends on who they are and you know, what our experience is with them and how familiar we are with their product and services.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And also, you had mentioned in one of your responses something about Microsoft materials and how that plays into this. Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. So I don't know about you guys. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a fairly positive response to this, but I get a ton of stuff from our friends at Microsoft. And when I say ton, I mean a ton. I get tons of emails and yammers and all that other stuff every single day. And I personally find it very difficult to cull through them all and figure out what's important and what's not. So, you know, God love Microsoft. They want to make sure you have everything that you need. But I would caution with the, you know, overfilling of my email box with stuff. Tell me what's important. Tell me the things that I need to know, because you know who I am and what services I have with you.
That would probably be a much more effective communication method than throwing me everything that you possibly have ever done, knowing that I really don't buy XYZ products from you. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And especially if you're looking at a future relationship with an ISV, as you said, you have to basically understand what is special about them so you can represent it to the potential customer. Okay, moving on. So this is something we always ask about in our research, the role of the trade show or events relative to all of the emphasis that there is on marketing online these days. So we asked, if an ISV chooses not to exhibit at a dynamics-focused trade show, do you interpret this as a negative sign? For example, would you think that the ISV is having financial difficulties or is considering exiting the marketplace? And you can see here predominantly the response was no to that question. So again, I think it would be just helpful if you could comment about presence at a trade show and what's important to you.
Sure. So trade shows and other seminars and things are, at least in my mind, networking opportunities from my perspective. So I try to find other people in the same environment that I'm in so we can bounce ideas off of each other. There's plenty of business for everybody, at least in my opinion. So you're not necessarily competing with each other when you share some of those kinds of stories. But I got to be honest, I don't say, oh, the XYZ company's not here, that must mean something. No, I don't do that. Really, trade shows are for networking, meeting other people, and that's what they're for, at least in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you. And then here are some of the responses we got from your peers. Again, the response set was so varied, I thought it was good to represent it. No, having a solid product matters much more than a trade show. Not anymore. They're so expensive with short-term benefits. Better to spread the benefit over a period. In the past, I used to think this. However, given how small many of the ISVs are, the cost of exhibiting, and the flux in Microsoft's trade show strategy, I no longer judge ISVs by whether they exhibit or not, I should say. Trade shows are so 2003. So a lot of sensitivity to, the proliferation of a lot of events and how expensive it may be. In this case, I'm not sure, the partners could be talking about how expensive it is for them to travel to them all, as well as for the ISVs to be there. And then on the yes side is basically what you said, that when you get there, face-to-face is important. It provides a way to meet new ISVs. It's good to meet their salespeople in person. And then on the maybe side, again, more of the same, concern about how expensive they are, but no judgment if an ISV isn't there. And then someone said they're just basically undecided because there's just so many events out there. So interesting, but I'm sure helpful insight for the ISVs. Okay, so now we had asked a couple of questions about lead generation that obviously is going to come from all this emphasis on online marketing. And specifically, since there's so much interest in webinars or white papers that would generate leads, we thought it'd be good to spend a little time understanding if a lead is generated from a program between you, a partner, and an ISV, is it okay for the ISV to follow up on that lead further qualify it before passing it on to you? So although the majority say yes, what becomes clear with the response set on both the no side and the maybe side and the yes side is that everybody wants really careful guidelines in the partner community in terms of how this is done. So we're going to spend time looking at those responses. On the yes side, the qualifiers were yes, but all initial and qualifying correspondence should include all parties. as long as the rules are clearly defined. It's okay if the follow-up's coordinated and there's trust and transparency, which are fundamentals for a trusted partner. Yes, but it still should be referred through to the partner. I thought this one was interesting, as they have the local knowledge and contacts. For instance, how does the ISV, often from another country for this particular partner because they're in Australia, how does the ISV know that you've not been pitching to the prospect previously for some time? On the no side, we just prefer to follow up ourselves. We do it very carefully. It depends on the scenario. I would prefer to be the first point of contact most of the time. And then those who are on the fence, the ISV should know us well enough to give us leads that fit our strengths and not just leads that are in our geographic area. Mostly yes, but the ISV has to be careful and over-communicate to make sure there are no unpleasant surprises. Rather have a discussion about any of my clients prior to the ISV reaching out or not discussing with me. I know things about every client they don't know. Sometimes it's already a client of mine, so I need to be involved so I can get commission. It depends on our agreement going into the event. So it's really clear that there are a lot of red flags being thrown up here, Joel. You had indicated that you follow up, or the follow-up you like, basically involves different practices based on the size of the company and the product focus. So can you elaborate? First of all, tell us what you think about the overall responses, and then elaborate on how you do it.
I'd be happy to. So really, the concern I would have is a couple of fold. Number one is if my customer is doing research on a specific ISV, which they do, right? They'll do that sometimes. They may hit one that's not on my target list, and then I have to necessarily explain to them why. Or they may find it first, and then it's kind of embarrassing because maybe I should have known about it and reached out to the ISV first. So there's a bunch of that kind of optics, I guess, for want of a better word, about moving those leads back and forth. A lot of it has to do with what the customer is doing and how interested they are in looking into things. Really, that's kind of my biggest caution there, is just to be careful. It's nice to know who's going to do what with respect to these kind of marketing leads. I would have some concern, depending on the customer and who it is, if the ISV actually reached out to, the customer first. Part of me would rather go ahead and have that lead passed and then I do the intro and conversation, but just something to think about.
So it's basically having a plan for how the lead should be handled and making sure that you have transparency to what they're doing before they do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. And then lastly, we asked the partner community if they used MSDynamics World to research ISVs in their solution, and as you can see, the majority said yes, that they did. And then there were a couple of follow-on questions to that. We asked them, what content specifically on MSDW do you find most useful or interesting? And please rank them. And as you can see here, it's a pretty close split between what we offered: news and opinion articles, webcasts, white papers, ISV add-on solutions. So this is really important because, as you can imagine, Joel, ISVs, everyone is on the phone here today, a lot of their budget goes into preparing the content that they put before you as a partner in your journey online. And you really were very clear today that you are looking for ISVs online from the onset. You use the internet to help qualify them. You are engaged with MSDW. You indicated that on your response set, and you indicated that you peruse their emails, webinars, and white papers. So I think it's really essential for these guys, the ISVs, to understand not only how are you attracted to webinars and white papers, which appeal to you, which don't, and kind of give us a sense, and I'll follow up with you on this because it's getting a little complex here, but where are you in your buying decision-making process when you use these various online resources? So if you could kind of like look at this visually, Joel, in terms of talk first about what is it that you download the most, and then where are you and how do you use that content to help you come to a decision, you know, in terms of an ISV and working with them.
Right. So as we noted before, I typically am early in the process when I use the web to get my first initial set of ISVs to have conversations with and vet. I really like webinars, as we've discussed before, that have a real-world problem. Here's how we're solving it. Here's a demo, and here's a customer that uses it. Those are very powerful. Number two is I like white papers that are real white papers, and I alluded to this a little bit ago. I really don't like clickbait white papers. No, it's a white paper on XYZ. Oh, well, I need to know more about XYZ, so you click on it, and it's a one-page slick, and it doesn't tell you anything. That's not good. I mean, if you're gonna offer up a white paper and use the term white paper, it needs to really be one, which means you tell me about a specific environment. I'll use a good one. I needed some information on EDI the other day, so I found a good white paper on EDI. It told me about what it's about. Very cool. Of course, at the end of it, the company touted their own stuff. Get it? That's what they should do. That's fair. But give me some background on the topic so I really understand it. I don't want to walk away an expert. I don't intend that. But give me some background and why people do it and what it is and are there different versions of it, that kind of thing. Really instruct me and inform me, and then tell me how your product will help deal with any situations that I get. Those are very powerful as well. That makes me feel like my time's been used wisely, and that it's a company I can trust if they can explain those things to me. So that's kind of my conversation with respect to that question.
Right. And so, you know, if we're imagining your journey, your buyer's journey on the partner side, basically to summarize what you said, you're educating yourself in a lot of instances, especially when you're looking for an ISV to help you with a product or that you haven't worked with previously. But you are also qualifying ISVs when you're looking for those webinars that have demos in them and where you expect, yes. So do you actually ever use a webinar like that to help create a short list for the ISVs that you will then go call?
I do. I mean, it's a combination of all the factors we've talked about, but like I've said, I vet them down to maybe 2 or 3, and then I get on the phone, just to be very blunt. I set up a call with the ISV and tell them what I'm trying to do and have them give me feedback and make me feel comfortable that there's someone that I can work with. So and I'm never going to buy an ISV online, obviously, but I can do my research initially and then start those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked you that intentionally because I think it's so essential for the ISVs online today to hear that. I mean, they already recognize how important their content is to doing business with you, but for them to hear that it actually makes or breaks whether you shortlist them, I think is really meaningful. So I thank you for that response, and Joe, we can't thank you enough for all the time you've taken and your insight. And so I'm going to quickly summarize the webcast today and then turn it to Q&A. So in summary, guys, I think what's really clear is that our partner community wants to collaborate with you, but rather than them put together plans for you, they're looking for plans that you generate that help spell out strategically how do you basically want to go to market with them and tie your product into their services. The other thing we see in this study is the incredible emphasis on online marketing. And as you just heard Jill explain, how important it is whether you run a webinar on your own or you co-sponsor with them, how important it is that the content within them is on target to the points that he made. And then I think another really important takeaway is the transparency that is required when you actually follow up on the leads that are generated from all this good content, and that the open communication that's needed for you to have a healthy relationship and reaching out to the potential prospect, doing that along with the partners. So that's my summary. I hope that was helpful for everybody here today. And we will turn it over to Q&A. And Joel, thank you again.
No, thank you. I appreciate the time. It's been a good experience.
Okay.
All right, so we have a lot of questions that came in and that are coming in. So why don't I go through these? I think a lot of them, Joel, looks like they might be for you. So why don't we start? So the first one is someone's asking, does AppSource in Microsoft standing play a role in selecting ISVs to partner with?
It certainly can. I mean, like many of you, we're new to, for example, Business Central, and trying to make sure that those different applications actually do what they say has been an experience. I'll give you an example of something I just heard literally today from our friends at Microsoft about some Business Central Power BI connectors that are actually not working right now. So while it's interesting to see it, I'm going to do a fairly broad search to find, and maybe AppSource would be one source, but there's probably others as well. So. And maybe I should say that a little differently. Just because you're on AppSource doesn't mean I'm going to instantly expect that your product works the way it should, I get the support I need, and I get the margins I need, right? So it's interesting, but it's not the only decision maker I would use.
So someone's asking, so in the webinar scenario, would you invite your customers to that webinar ahead of time? Would you promote it to them? I believe that's in the webinar co-marketing, right?
Yeah. I'd want to see it first, right? So if I have a webinar that I've seen before and they're going to have another one in a couple weeks, it's the same thing, absolutely, if I thought it was high quality, sure.
And another question, someone's asking, how do you handle it when a client searches online and finds a solution and brings it to the table as an option when they aren't currently an ISV partner of yours?
So that's part of the conversation that we have, and in the business we're in, being an integrator / support organization for our customers, honesty is key. And if they come to me with one I've never used before, I'm going to tell them that. I'm going to say, that's great, I've never seen them before. For that kind of service, we use these 3 companies, and here's why, or this one company, and here's why. I'm happy to reach out and talk to them with you or for you to try to vet them out a little bit. That's how I do it, just to be blunt, just to be very honest.
And next question, do you consider cross-country an issue when looking at ISVs? So, for example, time zone differences, which can impact support hours, et cetera?
No, not. We're all over the place these days. I don't think it matters. I mean, I'd prefer that the ISV support, sun up to sundown, follow the sun kind of thing across the U.S. But if they don't, probably I can work around it. I don't get too balled up about that.
Okay. And then here's the next question. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this. I don't know the answer to this one either. Is Salesforce's marketing communications approach different than Microsoft's?
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure in what context.
That one.
Yeah, I'm not sure in what context.
Yeah, I would need more context too.
Yeah. Yeah. So whoever asked that question, if you could just elaborate a little bit more, just so we can provide a better answer, that would be good. So we'll move on to the next one. So why do the customers approach ISVs first instead of talking to their NAV partner, in your opinion?
For a lot of reasons. I mean, we have customers who are very curious and like to do their own thing. I mean, I'm working with one right now that, you know, she's of the caliber that she can do a lot of this stuff on her own, to be blunt with you. So it really depends on the customer and their personality, to be blunt about it. I mean, there's some that just want to know stuff, right? So they'll go search around on their lunch hour and try to find something and bring it to you. So that's what I think.
So next question, someone's saying, so you talked of an ISV successfully relaunching to you. Can you share more of the context and why it was successful? This is a challenge for some ISVs in a very tight-knit market where ISVs often have to reinvent themselves over time.
Yeah, so this one was a extension of their current application. I won't go in too much more depth because I'll give away who it is, but they did a really nice job of explaining the marketplace and what they're trying to accomplish. Then they did an excellent demonstration. You know, demos can be painful or they can be well done, which is the person who's doing it knows exactly where to go. They explain what they're doing. They don't, they don't over-explain things, right, that kind of stuff. And then there, as I recall at the end, there was a discussion from a customer about it, you know, one of their beta customers, I believe it was. So that was very powerful. Seeing those three things together really made me feel comfortable that this company has it together and will provide good service for me when I'm ready to potentially use the product that they're offering. So it was really kind of those three things really hit on all cylinders, if you will.
Interesting. All right, let me see if we have any more questions. All right, so here's a question. So when new in the market, even with having the quality / support / margins to compete with other ISVs in your space, one, what is the best way to get noticed and considered by new potential partners? And two, what is the best way to get ignored or deleted?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of tough. I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow. I think I'm kind of stumped on that one, to be honest. I mean, if I'll give you an example. We were looking for a system internally to do something about 6 months ago, and I reached out to a company and said, "Hey, do you do this thing?" And they said yes. So I started getting calls from this salesperson. And I had to tell them, I said, "I'm sorry, you didn't make the short list." And they started getting almost belligerent about it. Like, why? Well, why can't we, that kind of thing. So really it's more of the relationship, I suppose. I mean, if I've got somebody who's new to the ISV space in a specific area and they think their product is really good, when you have a conversation with me, tell me that. Say, we're new to the market, but our product is better because we're going to really treat you well, and here's how we're going to do it. Some of those things would really help. But turn me off, I don't know, just not being very responsive, I suppose, that kind of thing. Hopefully that helps. That was a little bit of a stumper, I have to admit.
All right, let's see. Next question here. So how often are you, and I know you touched upon AppSource before, but someone's asking, how often are you using AppSource to find potential ISVs versus a simple Google search?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I use Google more because the AppSource stuff will show up there too. At least I think it does. So I'm more of a Google guy, to be blunt about it. But if I happen to be, trying to set up an extension in Business Central, for example, I'll go ahead and do a search in there real quick to see what I can find. But again, just because you're in there doesn't mean that you necessarily have a leg up on somebody else who does the same thing.
All right, let me see here. Now, this is not really a question, but it's a comment that somebody made, which I think is really interesting. So I'm going to read it. So this person's saying that. From their experience as an ISV, it's concerning if the partner does not. So if they provide a partner with a lead, and the partner doesn't follow up on the lead fast enough, they are more likely to just kind of bypass the partner and contact the lead directly themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Have you run into experiences like that before? Or, I guess maybe if you kind of talk about when you get a lead, like from an ISV, how, what's the follow-up process and how long does it usually take, et cetera?
Right. So when that happens, it's typically, who is the ISV and why are they sending it to me? Determine who that customer is, or potentially new customer even, and then decide who in the sales organization needs to take that over. That's kind of how we do it. There could be a day or two, a lag in there. I mean, it'll happen, right? Some desk time. But if we're not doing a good job of following up on leads, I expect the owner of that ISV, their channel manager to give me a call and say, hey, Joel, what's going on, man? We give you these leads and you sit on them. That would be the conversation I would want to have. And, if I don't call you back, then call them. Yeah, I mean, it's your business too. So we need to try to figure out a way to work together. But call me and complain to me, right, is what I would say.
Yeah. And I just thought of something while you were saying that too. What's sort of the level of transparency when an ISV passes a lead to a partner? Does that ISV have visibility into the status of that lead and what follow-up activity has taken place? I don't know if it's access to some CRM system that that shows those joint leads or not. Maybe you can kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one I use that has it's almost like a little quote tool and all that kind of fun stuff for new and existing customers. Some of you probably can figure out who that probably is, but most of them don't that I'm aware of. But a lot of it's just going to be throwing emails back and forth or phone calls, I would think.
Okay, interesting. All right, so here's another question. In regards to the webinar, Joel, that you mentioned for the ISV, how do they consume them? Do they typically consume them through a neutral party like MSDW, one-on-one, or a webinar out to various channel partners?
Yeah, I think the one that I'm thinking of, they did it themselves, very similar to what we're doing today. I don't think they went through a partner. I just don't recall, to be blunt. I don't remember for sure, but I think it was just them.
Okay. And then this person was nice enough to elaborate on the question that they had about Salesforce. He just mentioned something that you said during the session, that Microsoft tends to over-communicate with their marketing material, but you didn't mention the same for Salesforce. This person's curious as to whether or not NetStandard works with Salesforce.
That's a question we can take offline if you'd like to.
Okay. All right, so next question, someone's asking, what is the typical margin you'd expect from an ISV?
Ooh, wow, there's a good one. Well, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on if it's a long-term subscription model that I have, whether it's a one-time sale with maintenance on the backside. It needs to be significant. I don't know a minimum number, but 20, 30 sounds reasonable to me, at least as a starting point. Some are higher than that, and of course they're going to get my attention. What they do when they give you their margins is they're driving specific behavior on your part, just like our friends at Microsoft do, right? They really want me to sell Business Central because it gives me X points, right? So same thing for the ISVs. Excuse me, if you really want me to sell something, give me some nice margins on it and I will. 10 and 15 does not really get me too interested, right? It's not a whole lot of margin potentially for the trouble. And a lot of these ISVs, at least from my experience, are not huge dollars, right? They're not humongous amounts of money. So I'm just going to say in that, 30% range, just as a target.
And then I actually just had a quick question to add to that too, Joel. So, and I'm going to assume the answer is yes, but would you say that even if an ISV, let's say an ISV is trying to partner with you and their solutions are very inexpensive, but they work really well, so you're not going to make a lot of money, reselling them, but they will really help your customers.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a type of scenario that, you would choose to partner with an ISV like that, even though, it might not pay off monetarily, but, in terms of servicing the customers, your customers will be happier?
I would say, of course.
Yeah.
I'd rather make more margin, obviously, but if it's the exact perfect solution and it works exactly the way we need it to and the support's awesome, then giving up a few points of margin makes a lot of sense, right?
Perfect. All right, let me see here. Looks like we do have some more questions. I'm just going to keep firing them at you if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. So during a demo, let me just see, I kind of lost that question. Okay, during a demo, do you want to see how to do everything step by step, or just the basic features and end results?
Yeah, I don't need to see step by step how to do something, but I need to see the basics of how it operates. If that makes sense. It's kind of a fine line between showing everything, going to every single tab at the top of the page and, demonstrating each individual function. Obviously, you're not going to do that. But doing the core function of document management, I'll use as an example. So show me a document coming in and how you can make sure that you can read all the characters on it and put it onto something. Show me that. That's what it's all about, right? But you don't have to show me how to print it or how to, that doesn't matter. But show me the core components of what makes your product good, meet the requirements of the customer, and some whiz-bang stuff as well, right? That's kind of what I'm looking for, but not everything. No way, not at all.
Here's another question that just came in. You mentioned that customer testimonials are very important for you. Do you ever encourage your current customers to participate in testimonials or case studies for their ISV solutions?
I will if asked, and I will tell a customer, hey, I've got another customer that wants to use a product you use. Will you talk to them? Sure. I don't necessarily go back to an ISV and say, hey, my customer loves your product. You should do a case study. Now, if you ask me, I'd be happy to go find one for you, but usually it's a little more selfish reasons than doing that for the ISVs necessarily.
All right, let me see if we have any more questions coming in. These are really awesome questions, by the way.
Really
we've had
good.
so many good questions. Yeah, I'm blown away by these questions. So, keep them coming. And if you have questions that you didn't get a chance to ask today, but you want to reach out, we'll follow up with our email addresses. I'm sure a lot of you already have mine, but maybe we can send you Joel's as well if you have any further questions for him. But I'll give people another few seconds to collect their thoughts and see if they have anything else that they want to ask. And do not be shy.
Joel, we'll have to have you back for another session.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You may have to buy me a beer next time.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. I wish you weren't so far away.
I'm happy to help. It's kind of a hot topic for me, so I'm happy to see if I can help people. Happy to do that.
Yeah. You've been incredibly helpful.
It's greatly appreciated. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions coming in. So why don't we end it there? First off, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time out of their day to attend the session. I hope you found it useful. I did record this session, so we'll be sure to send everybody the link probably in the next day or so when it gets posted online. And once again, Mary Lou and Joel, I'd like to thank you for your time as well. It was a great presentation. I learned a lot. I had read the study prior, but some of the things that you said, Joel, actually really stuck out for me. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, happy to help.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Bye-bye.